So much for joining us today for the third episode of ESG's new webinar series, Customer Success Unlocked. I see folks are still rolling into the room, so we'll give everybody a moment to come on in before we get started with today's session. Welcome, folks. As you're joining, feel free to let us know in the chat where you are calling in from. We'd love to get to know our audience.
We got Chicago coming in.
Yeah, Chicago coming in, some familiar names and faces. Welcome, everybody. We're just giving folks a moment to come on in before we get started with today's session. Got folks from all over: Boston, Virginia, San Fran, ooh, the UK. Welcome. It's late there. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. All right, well, as folks are continuing to roll in, we will go ahead and get started. So I wanted to first start by introducing myself briefly. I am Marley Wagner, the Senior Director of Marketing and Services here at ESG. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar titled Centers of Excellence in Customer Success. I've really been looking forward to this session. Two wonderful speakers here today who happen to be ESG customers who are just the best, and we love and appreciate you guys so much. So before we get started, a couple of really quick housekeeping notes. Today's session will be kind of a fireside chat style interview. So everyone out there, you will not necessarily be seeing slides on the screen, but I promise that does not mean there's anything wrong with your Zoom. So I would also like to remind everyone that we are recording this session, and a link to the recording will be made available to you within 24 hours of the webinar. Check your email tomorrow for a link to that recording. In addition, throughout the session today, you are invited and welcome to submit your questions via the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen. We'll be sure to get to as many questions as possible, both throughout the presentation, and we'll leave set aside some time at the end for a specific Q&A portion. So housekeeping out of the way, I'm very excited to introduce our presenters today, Carlos Quezada and Rigo Rodriguez. I'm going to read a little bio about each of them because you both are so wonderful and have accomplished so much, and want to make sure everyone knows who's talking to them. So start with you, Carlos. Carlos Quezada is an enterprise digital services leader with over 20 years of experience in services, and he is currently the head of Aruba's digital services strategy and customer success. Carlos and his team have built an industry-recognized digital-first approach to CS. Congrats on that TSA Star Award nomination. And building strong teams across CS, ops, digital content, and an agile program are some of Carlos's strengths. Rigo Rodriguez leads global customer success at Pure Storage, the leader in all-flash data storage hardware and software products and services. Rigo was one of the early foundational team members to lead the development, delivery, and growth of Pure as a Service, Pure Storage's storage as a service platform that unifies on-premise and public cloud storage resources into a single data storage subscription. You guys are both amazing. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you. We at ESG are so lucky to have wonderful, inspiring, smart customers like you who are willing to get up and talk with me about this really exciting topic. So thanks so much to both of you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Marley, and also recognitions to you and the ESG team. You know, you guys have demonstrated a lot of leadership in the space. And for those of you guys that are listening, I'll take the opportunity for the shameless plug. And you know, a lot of the ESG members have been nominated for top 100 influencers in the success space. So I would highly recommend that for those folks on the call, take the time to recognize their efforts and what they're doing to help us form this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll quickly piggyback on that as well, too. I mean, you guys have been fantastic to partner and work with, and can generally say that a lot of what we've accomplished has really been done on the hard work and the expertise of the ESG. So thank you very much for the invitation.
So sweet of you, Bill. Thank you. Carlos, congrats to you. Well-deserved right back on your nomination for Top CS 100. And thank you so much for the shout out. We always appreciate you. So On to the topic of today's discussion, centers of excellence in customer success. I'm sure there are people out there who are like, what the heck are you guys even talking about? What is that? So, you know, folks out there may have heard the term center of excellence used in the context of IT, operations, HR, even, you know, industries like healthcare and manufacturing. But this concept has really yet to gain widespread adoption in the world of customer success. Although I think, you know, the three of us can all agree that it should. So want to start by having, Rigo, maybe we'll start with you. Will you share with our audience how you think about what a customer success center of excellence is?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I actually like to describe the center of excellence that we're moving towards is really having customer success, the organization, be the tip of the spear, the subject matter experts for that post-sales service experience. We take the best of breed across all of the service delivery organizations, professional services, technical services, combine that into what we believe should be the ultimate best practice experience for our customer engagement, and then really act as the central point of contact for either tooling, templates, strategy, methodology, delivery, all of that things so that we maintain that strategy, the process, governance, change management, everything that will be included in the forward-looking state of customer experience and how that impacts not just our internal delivery organizations, but our customers as well.
Love it. Carlos, anything to add? Do you have a definition, a working definition that you guys use?
Yeah, I mean, really, the whole concept of customer success, at least with us, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is really this concept about, you know, the subject matter expertise that comes with, you know, whether it's process, program development, training, data analytics, right? You have this core team that actually provides that best practice as a shared resource to the different parts of the organization that are going to be participating in the delivery of the customer success. And you know, just kind of looking at Wikipedia, right? The way that they define it is a shared team that provides leadership, best practices, support, and/or training in a focus area. And so in our case, and we'll talk about this here a little bit, but you know, developing the COE really allowed us to really cement what our role in the company was at a much bigger scale, as opposed to just focusing on, you know, the CSM aspect of it.
Yep, and I think that's a really important component, right? What happens outside of just the CSM? CSMs are critical. They're not the only part of customer success, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if either of you have any theories about why you think COEs have not really gained popularity in customer success to date.
Carlos, you want to start first?
Yeah, I'm going to be brutally honest. I think it's lack of backbone. I've actually had an opportunity to speak with a lot of CS leaders in the early stages of their kind of building, and I think that there's a lot of imposter syndrome coming into this, right? I think that as some of these CS leaders enter into the company and they're being asked to go and build up this customer success program, I don't know that they realize the importance and criticality of this function in the company. And a lot of times they come in here and they're kind of in the shadows of the sales and marketing team that are really well established. And I feel like they have to kind of walk around, kind of ask to be part of the discussion. And I think what ends up happening is, unless you actually have that kind of boldness in you to go in and step up and demand that seat at the table and make other people understand how you're actually going to be supporting the growth of the business, and how they may not realize it now, but 2 to 3 years, you're going to be a really big deal. And so I think that, you know, if you come into it with a CSM mentality, you're starting wrong. I think you need to come into it with a much broader conversation. I mean, one of the most overly used cliche terms in customer success is it's not a role, it's a philosophy. And so as a COE, it's your job to evangelize that philosophy and make sure that other people understand what their role is as part of the customer success team, because customer success team doesn't stop at the CSM, right? And so to me, like I said, being brutally honest, I think a lot of our CS leaders out there need to be a little bit more bold.
Love it. That's quite the hot take, Carlos. Folks, chat us if you agree or disagree. We'd love to hear from you. So I know both of you are at quite different stages of implementing and adopting a COE model, right? Rigo, you're really just sort of on the verge of getting started with this, versus Carlos, you've been doing this for a couple of years now. So curious to hear from both of you. Carlos, maybe we'll start with you since we'll go back in time a minute. And just talk to us about what prompted you initially to start moving in that COE direction.
It was out of necessity. It kind of goes back to the comment I just made, right? So when I first started the customer success program, I went down the path of, I found a problem, right? We identified a problem of renewals and also lack of an onboarding practice. So we started working on that. But then as I started trying to execute and institute processes across the organization, I was always presented with some barriers to entry, right? Like, who are you? Why are we doing this? Things like that. And then not only that, but then there was sprinklings of concepts of customer success across the company, but there was no unification of any of that, right? And furthermore, as many of us in the industry are aware, there are folks who have actually assumed or claimed the customer success role or customer success manager role, but historically those roles have actually been more like technical account management, professional services, but not really end-to-end lifecycle management as the CS, I would say, art actually now describes it. And so in order for me to actually have the opportunity to influence and unify, I had to do something different than being another little pocket of CSM within the company. And so that's where kind of the bold moves came in. And so for me, it was really important to go in and establish that what we were doing was a lot more than just hiring CSMs. It was really establishing this as a discipline. And I remember one morning I was doing a monthly business review and I was reporting out the status of what we were working on. And my opening slide was Customer Success Center of Excellence monthly business review. And I kept that slide going forward. And that's how this got created. There was no organizational structure conversation with my boss. It was just like a self-nominated COE. And as this thing has grown legs, people started leaning into it, respecting the COE term. And the funny thing is that the COE term is now something that's being adopted across other parts of the organization now too. Like we have like the data and analytics COE team now. We have like, so it's starting to grow legs, but it's awesome because now people understand the concept. They realize that it's a much broader term, not just the group.
Yes, love that. You're a trendsetter. Rigo, same question to you. This is a more recent kind of decision that you guys have started to march in this direction. So curious to hear what the trigger was for you at Pure Storage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think similarly to Carlos, it really just came from the need to expand that customer engagement, that focus on shepherding our customers through the entire life cycle. This is not a problem that's exclusive to Pure. I mean, I have come from a 25-year background of working primarily for services organizations, and we all know customer success was born in the SaaS space. So now that a lot of hardware companies, which Pure is, and I saw this at my previous shop as well too, they are now just getting on board with the whole customer success methodology, practice, and really the value that extends across all of the service delivery customer-facing organizations. So that is really what drove the need here at Pure. Is we wanted to get past our legacy hardware roots and really start to develop a more hands-on, higher level of engagement, more strategic consultative approach to that customer lifecycle experience from the day that they sign the contract, or even hopefully in most cases, even before they sign the contract, we get ourselves embedded and start to really deliver the value of the onboarding, the adoption, the optimization, really just shepherding them through the entire life cycle. So that is really where the need for customer success, as well as the need to extend the methodology of customer success via the COE to the rest of the organization came from.
And to expand on that, Rigo, will you just share with everyone kind of where you guys are in the process now? I mentioned you're still early on, so we just share, okay, we decided to march in this direction. Here's where we're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So customer success has really only been around here at Pure for as long as I've been here. I came on very specifically to build out the methodology, the practice, and the teams. And now that we've laid the majority of the foundation, there's still some things that we need to do. But we're almost there. So once we've laid the majority of that foundation, we are now going to start doing that in a way that allows us to move towards being this center of excellence model, the tip of the spear, again, as I like to refer to it as. So we are getting all of the pieces in place. A lot of that will extend to other delivery partners and professional services, technical services. So really trying to set them up to understand how to deliver the methodology. And then once we are able to extend that capability, that skill set to these other delivery organizations, we are then shifting ourselves over to a COE.
Thank you. And Carlos, same question back to you. You guys are in a very different place now than you were when you first started down this path. You mentioned, people are starting to be copycats, which is certainly the most sincere form of flattery, but would love to hear from you. What's your status right now of your customer success center of excellence?
Yeah, I would say that we're at the point now where we've actually established a pretty well I would say, proven framework for this kind of customer success methodology. And so now what's happened is we're actually broadening our scope. And so as part of the COE, we essentially offer kind of our COE offerings, if you will, or services to other parts of the organization. And so now what's happening is a lot of the work that we did originally in building up kind of the charter and the focus area and the journey mapping and the KPIs, and a lot of the work that we did to build out the success program for the initial product set has served as a foundation now for a rinse and repeat model. And so now what's happening is we're actually being brought into all the other new service offerings that are coming in, and the customer success framework is at the core. So as an example, as part of our new service introduction program, the journey mapping exercise is now a requirement to exit, which means that now the team on my side, which I call the customer experience enablement team, they're now integrated into the new services introduction process so that there's a clear documentation and ownership and accountability from the delivery teams. And so they understand what role they play across that entire journey. And, you know, it's just continued to evolve. And as many of you guys may or may not be aware, Aruba is actually part of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And so now we're probably about 2 years ahead of HPE on this journey to as a service. And so now this COE is now actually being brought into the HPE conversations to help accelerate that program as well.
Awesome. It's so wonderful to have, you know, we at ESG have been there to observe that transformation and help you along the way. And it's incredible to see, you know, what we were looking at 2 years ago and what we're looking at now.
It's amazing how we have photos of whiteboard conversations that have actually come to fruition, right? It's great to see.
Yes, agreed. So I want to move on to talk about the types of roles, the types of people that need to make up a customer success center of excellence, right? It can be a little bit different than in what we see as a traditional, in quotes, since we all made this up not that long ago, but traditional customer success organization, right? We talked about, okay, it's not just the CSM. What else is it? What are those other roles that you need in a COE model? Where do they sit in that org structure? How do you prioritize adding them? That was a lot of questions, but who wants to go first?
Rigo, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first ones that comes to mind is actually a question regarding this very topic, more specifically data and analytics. I think everything for me needs to take a data-driven approach. You need to be able to validate, confirm, substantiate, and really put actionable decisions behind the data and that you are working from to make just about every and any decision. I mean, we're building out a BI and analytics team within customer success, although even though Pure already has a more formal BI and analytics team, because of our hardware legacy and our DNA, they are focused on a slightly different perspective. They're looking at it from a hardware CapEx perspective. We're looking at it from a service delivery engagement perspective, with the intention of becoming a little bit more preemptive and proactive. So I think data is huge. You absolutely need to have a very strong data and analytics and BI team that can go in there and just mine the data and just filter it, pivot, do whatever you need to do to get all of the perspectives that you need, so that you could, again, make those actionable decisions. The other one that was key for me, and I'm sure that Carlos will agree with this as well too, is the CS Ops manager. Having someone come in and just kind of bring it all together, somebody that could act essentially in a pseudo program management, operations delivery perspective that has that oversight to understand how to connect all of the dots. So that right now, I'm still at a stage where I'm building out the customer success team, the service delivery managers, but as this extends, it'll really be focused on more areas of specialties such as delivery, such as analytics, such as operations, to some extent program management, to bring it all together as well too. So those are some of the foundational roles that I think are key to provide that overarching visibility across all of the areas that you need. Carlos, I don't know if you agree or if you have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, no, I think I absolutely agree on all points. And just to maybe give a little bit, elaborate a little bit more on that, what I wanted to share is really kind of the way that we've set up the org over time. And so I wanted to demonstrate it here just really quickly. So when you take a look at the way that our customer success center of excellence is built out, it's really based around a framework of 4 different groups, right? I mentioned earlier, we've created this concept of a customer experience enablement. And the reason I call it the customer experience enablement is because this is the team who, when presented with a new product, presented with a new, I would say, task to go in and build out the capabilities to drive customer success, one of the first things that we have to ask is, what's the charter of this team going to be? Right? As many of us know, in the customer success world, there's a couple of different models for customer success. There's customer success under sales, where more quota carrying, driving expansion and cross-sell. Then there's other customer success that's all about onboarding, retention, right? And then there's hybrid models. And so before we even start building what this team's going to do, it's important to make sure that we understand and align on a common charter. So this is some of the work that the team does, really around the strategy of how this is going to work. Then we go into, this team is the one that's going to go in and actually bring the workshops together across the different delivery teams to go in and journey map how this is going to be delivered, make sure people understand where they sit in the cycle and what they expect to receive from the delivery team before them and their accountability to the team behind them, right? So the CX team is really the one that does a lot of the design work up front. Then we also have the CS Ops team, as Rigo mentioned, right? And the CS Ops team in my group actually manages two things. One is it manages all the data analytics and systems, right? So, you know, the interconnectivity between whether it's the product and getting telemetry out of the product, or connecting our customer success on a platform to like the SFDC platform, or getting contract information from some of our other databases, right? So that team, from a systems perspective, is responsible for that, but then also all the analytics that we have and insights that we derive out of all the data we have. So this is where we get our, what's our customer health score? What's the churn, right? What's our expansion rate, right? What's the average time for adoption, right? What, how are we doing on our digital comms perspective, right? So this is the team that actually brings that data to life. And then I also have a digital comms team, as Marley mentioned. We actually started this intentionally as a digital first approach, because we were walking in a situation, we had a large amount of what we would call tech touch or long tail customers, as we know in the industry. And I didn't have the number of headcount resources, and also couldn't justify assigning resources dedicated to accounts that were this small. But the contribution of that cohort to the overall revenue was significant enough where it's like, we have to still pay attention. And so we've actually really doubled down on digital comms piece. And so in this case, we actually hired a person who's very good at retention marketing. And so this is where, you know, the strategy around the digital engagement comes in, right? What is that going to look like? So we take the work that's happening from the enablement team and take the journey maps. And then as part of those journey maps, we say a welcome letter needs to be sent here. Well, that welcome letter gets created by the digital comms team. And aside from just creating the asset, we also track the effectiveness of that letter. So when that letter goes out, right, we do A/B testing, we go in and we track open rates, click-through rates, right? All that campaign management piece happens out of that group, and we report it as a delivery team. So in our case, the work that's happening out of the digital comms team, to me, is being treated as the performance of the CSM, but delivered virtually. So we actually measure the performance of the digital engagement very similar to the CSM, but obviously the goals for the KPI is a little bit different. But one of the things I wanted to call out about this model, which, and the last one that I'll talk about is the CSM, is obviously the CSM is one that we're all very familiar with. And the reason I put this slide up is because when I talked about being bold earlier, as you're coming into an organization, if you get hired to come in and build a customer success team, do not just focus on this puzzle piece, because you will fail, right? You need to make sure that when you're coming into this, you need to go in and build out a support structure, whether these other roles are part of your team or not. But you need to make sure that these other puzzle pieces are in place somewhere in the company, and that they understand what their role is in being able to successfully build that. Because if all you're doing is coming and building a team of customer success managers, then there's really not a lot of substance behind that, right? And what this model has actually done, going to my earlier comment, is as the COE, we've now gone and built a model that allows for flexibility, which, by the way, this is where you get like your advanced services, your high touch programs, right? You can still contribute as a COE to the entire company, but the delivery of customer success doesn't have to lie inside your team. So as long as this team is leveraging the journey maps that got created by this team, and we have this team building out the digital engagements, and we have this team building out a lot of the platform, then this team can live anywhere else in the company. And that actually allows itself to very positive interactions, because now you're not threatening the existence of another team. If anything, you're a support structure for the rest of the company, and it actually gets you more seats at the table than you like, right? And so the earlier comment about this concept of this COE for digital analytics, well, guess what? This team is on that COE too, right? It's like this, you know, what ends up having subject matter experts sitting at the table in the right conversations and bringing things together, right? And ideally, if this thing really takes off, and as I mentioned earlier, with different COEs being created, you actually become a very efficient organization where your whole organization is a COE. And that is what really drives that collaboration.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's so important too, right? We think about customer success as CSMs. It can be so much more than that and should be so much more than that. I'm seeing a couple of comments in the chat that the graphic is a little small behind you, Carlos. So we'll just send it out to everyone after the webinar. We'll make sure everyone gets a copy after the session along with the recording. So I want to expand on something you were just talking about. We got a question in the chat wondering how hierarchy works within a COE with those, sort of 4 divisions. How does your hierarchy work in your team?
So again, this COE was built as part of as far as my organization. So I actually have a leader in each one of those, right? So I have one person leading my CX enablement team. I have another person who's running my CS ops team, which is a platform data analytics. And I have another person who's actually managing all my digital comms. And then the last person is I have a leader managing my CSMs. In that model, though, the CSMs that are part of my group are what we would call kind of SaaS-focused CSMs. But we also have other CSM teams that are part of my organization that aren't part of the COE, but they're delivering kind of monetized customer success programs, right? So what we've done is by building this out and demonstrating these capabilities, we've now been able to create and embed customer success capabilities in our existing advanced service programs, and actually have achieved monetization of customer success through that. So in my case, like I said, each one of the leaders in these puzzle pieces reports directly to me, but then they obviously have a team underneath them driving the different capabilities.
Yeah, and we've actually we have some other customers who have a center of excellence that the CSMs are not a part of at all, to your earlier point, Carlos, right? It's just those other 3 orgs that operate the digital comms and kind of the overall customer experience that sit in the COE. And then the CSMs sit in another org. We've seen where the CSMs sit in their regional orgs. So they're not even centralized, right? There are a lot of different models that you can use for that structure, for that hierarchy. Rigo, at Pure Storage, I know you guys are set up a little bit differently too. Do you want to talk about, well, could be either how you're set up now or how you're planning to be set up as the COE becomes implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, we're still, as I mentioned, we're still very foundational. So I'm still building the resources up that will be responsible for delivering for 2 primary business lines or product lines that we support here at Pure. That's the focus because they are so new, not just to Pure, but to the industry as a whole. One of them focuses primarily on Kubernetes and containers. And, just even in tech and generally speaking, the skill set to support that technology is still very limited. So we are building the delivery teams within the organization, helping train and essentially home grow our own technology service delivery resources. So that is still the focus for us, in addition to building a lot of the foundation and the framework. But as that evolves, the plan is to move in the direction of supporting business units. We're going to align to the business units and make sure that we have subject matter experts aligned to that business unit. Similar to Carlos, I'm looking at a framework where I have functional leaders across all of the units that support our partners, our stakeholders, and everyone that we have to work with. So I see it as a mini business unit within customer success where you have functional leaders for analytics, for delivery, for ops, whatever it may be that you're trying to organize there. But I think, one of the things I wanted to absolutely reiterate, Carlos hit on, and I think it's important just to align with the question that was in the chat here, is in terms of the hierarchy. I think you absolutely have to look at it from the perspective of establishing and articulating what your charter is. I think because, as Carlos mentioned, there are some other organizations within the company that have very similar roles, and they may see it as you stepping on their toes, and you have to educate others, not just within the company, but your customers, to help them understand that you are really coming in as a subject matter experts. The intention is not to take anyone's job. It's really just to create a standardized, unified customer experience that everyone can get on board with, and make sure that we're all consistently driving and delivering against the same model. So for us, yeah, just to answer your question, Marley, it's we're moving in the direction of aligning to business units. But it's all going to be focused on the charter of customer success, onboarding, adoption, value realization, and renewals and expansion. So we are maintaining our focus in terms of a practice. How we're delivering that and for who is the only thing that changes slightly.
Rigo, and the key word there that I want to make sure that I extract from what you just said is consistency. Yeah. That's really the work here, right? It doesn't matter which business unit, doesn't matter what product, doesn't matter what is a service, right? having that consistent experience is what really is the outcome of a lot of this. And so now, all the welcome letters being sent out, whether it's from professional services, whether it's from advanced services, right? All those welcome letters, same look and feel, same content, curated with the same group, and we're tracking it, right? We're tracking the effectiveness, we're making sure it's working. So that's really the value that this brings in is it starts removing some of those silos and ensuring that we're driving that consistent piece, right? And the one thing I'll also say, because I know that many of the folks that are on here maybe are just getting started, don't confuse the COE name with scale or with a sense of maturity. I think it's important to understand that these are concepts that you're probably doing already, even at a small scale, but putting a label on them and defining kind of what those things are, I think is super important, because it starts setting that framework and starts really going and segregating the deliverables of your team. When we first got started, and Marley, you know this, when we first got started, there was 3 of us. When we started the COE, there was 3 of us, right? But it was more of establishing ourselves as here's what we have to offer. And as we started building, we started getting help and we started expanding, but really it helped us really, again, cement how we were different from those other pockets of CS and how we were actually going to bring that consistency to the entire company.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That consistency component is critical. The pushback I hear from people when we start talking about consistency is folks, especially in really large enterprises, right, where they're global, they have all these different regions and geos, they have all these different product lines. The pushback I hear is, okay, consistency is great, but with all those differences, be it culturally or with the actual physical product my customers are using throughout the entire base, I can't always do everything 100% the same way. I don't think that's what a COE is trying to do, right? For me, I would say a COE is trying to get you 80% of the way there to that standardization, that consistency, right? I think consistency is actually even a better word than standardization, because it's indicative of that 80%. And then be it geos or product groups or whatever, have that little bit of flexibility to meet the specific needs of their unique segment or their unique customer base based on that level of consistency. So I want to talk about that. I want to dig into that a little bit. I want to, Carlos, maybe you start, since you've been doing this for a while. How have you seen, teams, maybe the CSMs outside of your direct org you mentioned, be able to take what you guys are providing and then, shift it that little extra bit to make it perfect for what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I think that's where the CX and Element team comes in. And just to also expand on what you mentioned, Marley, I think that consistency should not also compete with flexibility. Mm-hmm. Right? Because all the products are different, the delivery teams are different, they all have a different scope. But can we all agree that they all probably need a welcome letter? Yes. What the welcome letter says may be different, right? Can we all agree that we should probably check in with the customers 15 days after delivery? Yes. What that check-in looks like? Is it a health check? Is it a collecting of access, right? But the whole concept is we understand that onboarding is needed. So that's consistent. What are we doing for onboarding? That's consistent. The actual details behind it are going to vary beyond the product, the use case. We have customers all the way from Home Depot to like mom and pop barbershops, right? You're not going to engage them the same way. But what we are consistent on the fact that there's a need to stay close with the customers, and how we do that is dependent on, the engagement model. And so to your point, Marley, I think as we initially started expanding beyond our little micro bubble and bringing in other teams, I think that the pendulum definitely swung in that direction when we started having the discussions around just brainstorming. And one of the first things that we do is we bring in all of the teams that are typically involved in the process of getting a customer from purchase all the way through. And we'll just ask, we'll start with current state mapping. Can you explain to us, okay, let's assume an order came in, what happens next? Everybody in the room's got an opinion, but only one person actually knows the answer. And that's when everybody realizes, well, crap, I've been wrong this whole time. And so as we go in and actually start understanding what everybody's role is, and everybody has an assumption of what that person is doing and that person's doing, but once you bring them together and you understand current state, and then you start having the discussion of, well, what's the experience we want to deliver? What are the gaps and how do we get there? the fact that we're leading that conversation, we're bringing in and herding those cats that historically have had a hard time getting together, and now they're leaning in and saying, well, it would be really awesome if I didn't have to do this. Like, if you just sent me these 2 or 3 things, I could do this much better. And they're like, oh, well, I had no idea. Like, as soon as those conversations start happening, then people immediately start seeing the value of the work that's happening. And as an outcome, when that journey map gets delivered, and because usually what we do is when we complete this, we actually present the journey map to the executive team and saying, are you aligned with the experience that we're about to deliver? And the entire team could not be more proud of the work that's being presented, because they finally feel like they got it down, right? And then that's the point where, again, from a COE perspective, we'll continue to support it, but the delivery is not us, right? You have pre-sales engineers that are getting involved, and they now know what they're supposed to be doing. And our automation tool is probably sending them emails going, your next step is this, right? But again, that's where we kind of, I call it getting off the bus. We get off the bus and let them do their day job, but we'll continue to support and iterate. But at the end of the day, they're the ones in charge of driving that bus, right? So that's what we've seen. That's where we've seen the tipping point is as we start bringing in and people start understanding the process, then it starts making a lot more sense.
Yeah, and I think those are all really, really important strategies for overcoming that pushback you may encounter when attempting to implement or advocate for a COE. Like I said, a lot of the pushback I would expect people to hear and that we've heard is people say, well, I can't standardize 100%. That's not the point, right? On that note, sorry, Rigo, as you've been sort of socializing this idea, explaining to your peers and your executives and whoever else at peer that you're like, hey, I want to move in this COE direction. I'm curious from you if you've run into similar pushback from anyone or different pushback and how you've addressed those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think pushback is always expected when others feel like you're encroaching on their responsibility, their ability to control their experience, their deliverables. That's a lot of really what it comes down to. And one of the things that I try to articulate and convey when I'm introducing the concept of the COE is as a COE, while we are driving in the direction of being viewed as the tip of the spear, we are not expected to come up with all of the tools, all of the delivery, all of the methodology. There's a lot of really good work going on in these other organizations. The intention that I'm trying to establish here is we're going to take all the great work that you've done, standardize that, create the consistency across the other orgs, across the experience, across the people that have to support this, so that it all looks like one cohesive, consistent experience versus one organization and doing it one way, the other organization doing something similar, but heading in a different direction. So we're really trying to bring unification to the process, to the handoffs, to the experience. And that really is the focus for us, is how do we take what all the great work that some of these other teams are working on, bring it together in this cohesive, consistent strategy and delivery model. So because of that, a lot of people will see it as you are stepping on their toes. You're taking their ability to control their templates, their tools, their processes, and that's not it at all. As a matter of fact, once they start to realize that you are there to help them optimize that, you are help them create that the interconnectedness, the interlock with some of the other organizations that they historically may have struggled to build that interlock with, you start to get a lot more collaboration because they see you as yet another team to help them accomplish their goals and objectives. And so when you can do that across the entire company and bring that consistency together, that's really where you start to see the change.
Carlos, I know you did something very similar. You have your amazing story about your road show that you went on at Aruba when you first were proposing this COE concept to everybody. Will you share that story with us, please?
Yeah, there's a famous quote that apparently I've been quoted on that says, people don't destroy something they help build. Shameless plug for those of you, for that one person who knows what I'm talking about. And so for me, it's always been making people part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And so I was like, if I'm going to go in and really ask that the rest of these teams lean in, they need to be a part of and align with what this is. And so initially what we did is we created what the charter was going to be. And we defined that internally within the team, saying, here's what we want to do. And we put some very key words in there that we're going to spike the attention of the folks, right? We put things in there like data-driven and, obviously driving experience and driving value and product feedback. And there was always something for the VP of product management in that charter. There was something in there for like the VP of IT and engineering, who we're going to need to get data from. And we basically went and did one-on-one sessions with each one of those leaders and said, look, we just want to share our charter, see what you think, get your feedback. Do we need to add anything? And so it was about, I call it about a 1-month roadshow, just trying to get calendars aligned. And in every one of those sessions, one, they were super impressed that we're coming to them and considering their feedback at the creation of this. And everybody had something to contribute, whether it was like a comma, a dash, an and, or an or maybe change this word to this. And we basically took everybody's input. And at the end of the day, we ended up creating the charter based on that input, but landed on what we wanted it to be. But then the way that we completed the roadshow, we brought them all back together in the room at the same time, replayed the final charter to them, and essentially said, based on all your feedback, here's where we landed. Thanks for that. And now we also ask for your support to make this happen, which means that in order for us to make this happen, it will only happen if you and your team help us make it happen. And so now what that did is whenever anybody, either myself or my team, reached out to those organizations, there was a clear understanding of why we were asking and what we were trying to accomplish. So that's something that we've done as a common activity. Anytime we're about to stand up another customer success program for a new product or new service offering, is we define that charter, we float that charter between the key stakeholders and make sure that we're aligned. We get them to sign off on it. We actually have a slide now with check boxes to make sure that we document that sign off. But what they're checking off is not only do they agree on the charter, but they also agree to support it.
Love that. Just in case anyone out there is listening and is like, wait, what's a charter? Carlos, will you just very briefly explain what a charter is? Because you mentioned it a couple times there.
Yeah, so it's very important to understand what is it that this team's trying to accomplish, right? So in our case, I mentioned this earlier, there are different models for customer success. Some of them are very sales driven, right? Driving adoption or driving expansion and cross-sell. Other forms of customer success are more focused on experience, driving adoption and retention. And so it's very important that the rest of the company knows what you're trying to achieve. And so in our case, the charter was around, ensuring customers derive value from Aruba solutions through a data-driven approach, driving personal engagement, right, and automation. That was a charter. And the outcomes of that charter are going to be to accelerate time to value, accelerate time to adoption, while ensuring that we reduce churn, right? That's my elevator speech, right? I mean, that was my charter. In other cases, the charter could be, we're creating this new service offering to drive service revenue, but also to go in and drive penetration of this particular product or service in this particular market, right? So it's very important that people understand what you're trying to set up. They understand what their contributions are to that, and then what are the outcomes that we're going to mutually drive, right? So that's what's super important, because what ends up happening is, one of the worst things that can happen is you end up in a meeting and you assume everybody knows what your team's doing. You start presenting and they're like, I'm sorry, what is this? Right? That's the wrong way to get into it, right? So for me, it was very important that this senior leadership, not only knew what we were, but they contributed into the definition of what we were trying to do. And that meant they were aligned.
Yeah, I just want to quickly hit on that as well, too. I think that is key. I mean, we have to keep in mind that while we all live and breathe customer success every day, customer success as a true practice and methodology has really only been around for less than 10 years. So I have always just kind of gone into some conversations assuming that everybody knows what customer success is, and have been more surprised to find out that not everyone does. So I think that is extremely important that you establish and help educate people on the difference between your charter and what some other very similar charters are.
So true. And, the next question I want to ask you both actually ties nicely into that. And Rigo, what you were talking about earlier about how, Pure and Aruba too really historically are hardware companies, right? Now living in a SaaS world. So both organizations are going through these really incredible, powerful digital transformations. So I'm curious to hear from you if there are other folks in similar situations, if you think that digital transformation, certainly it impacted the need for customer success, right? So feel free to talk about that. But even more specifically, how and if do you think it has impacted that necessity you both mentioned for that center of excellence model? Rigo, first.
Sorry, Marley. Yeah, absolutely. I think, with the popularity and growth of SaaS and subscription-based models, really it's all about the customer experience. I mean, customers have so many options to just quickly pick up and leave and go somewhere else where they're going to get a better experience. I mean, let's look at Amazon, to be completely honest. A lot of people are willing to order packages because they just make it so easy to return those, and just the process by which all of that is managed is just it makes it seamless, it's easy, and it's consistent. So as we move in a direction as not just technology, but business in general, will really have to focus on the customer experience. You have to focus on the feedback. You have to focus on essentially helping drive and influence that engagement, that interaction in the direction that you want the outcome to be. I think that has become key. That has become more and more, even in a legacy hardware company such as Pure Storage. And I saw this at my last company as well. They were moving away from being hardware companies. They dropped all mention of anything hardware and moved in the direction of subscription and services, because it is now all about the experience. So I think, the fact that subscriptions and SaaS and customer success as a methodology and practice has essentially penetrated these other industries where we have not historically have seen it, is all driven by the need to really ensure that you are holding yourself accountable, your service delivery accountable, your engagement, and that you're doing that based on a data-driven approach. Because quite simply, customers have so many options these days that they don't have to stay put anywhere. So it really comes down to that, in my opinion.
Carlos, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think it's important to note is that both Rigo and I's organization are under the services organization at the company. And the reason I bring that up as being super critical is, some of the studies done by TSA and some of the observations is that a lot of the major hardware manufacturers are reporting the same trend, that the overall product revenue as a company is declining, but the services revenues are increasing. And so very quickly, what that means is that the service is going to become the product. So when you talk about the role that services plays in the overall company strategy is super critical. It changes the kind of shift of that, I would say, power over to services to really define what are the features the product needs to have for me to deliver the service, as opposed to, we just built a product, let me build a service around it, right? So that shift is happening, right? And so to your point, we historically have been very, very hardware heavy, but the framework and the capabilities from customer success play well there. As an example, historically, in a hardware business, services makes money off of support contracts, right? You sell advanced service contracts through hardware, you sell them for 1, 2, 3 years. But what ends up happening is the customer purchases a support contract, they get access to support. There's very little proactivity, there's probably little reach out to the customer, because we feel if the customer is going to need help, they're going to call us. But what stops us, even from the hardware space, to go in and send like a welcome letter and say, hey, thanks for purchasing, here's some resources should be available. And then maybe 30 days in, it's like, hey, just checking in, how are we doing? Here's a customer effort score. How hard has it been for you to get to where you need to be, right? And have the customer used to getting the manufacturer just checking in, whether it's digitally, check in, how are we doing? And then embedding things like, we use Calendly on our side. What's wrong with sending a customer every 3 months a message saying, hey, just want to check in how you're doing. If you're having any problems, let's have a call with Tact. Click on here to schedule a time on your time to reach out. All those capabilities are customer success native capabilities that are now being introduced into the hardware space. And in the hardware space, there's a challenge because we don't always have telemetry data coming back home, but we should know how long it takes a customer to set up a product. So after 30 days, if the customer, if you send a customer, just want to make sure everything went well, how's it going? Did you complete what you needed? If not, let's schedule a call. A lot of those things are customer success native capabilities that can also be inserted, even with lack of data, into the on-prem space. And so, one thing to mention is the entire company on the Hewlett Packard side is moving to the as a service model, which means that all of our data center products, or storage or compute, the networking side, there's a lot of hardware there, but that hardware is not what's being sold. What we're selling is an end-to-end solution, right? And so that's why as a lot of these things start to pivot, being in hardware, a hardware vendor does not prevent you from driving these. And then one of the things that I would say that we're also doing that I'm actually really proud of, I feel like we're also doing something that's kind of net new from a customer success perspective, is how do we engage our partners? We're a 3-tier distribution model. How do we get partners engaged to drive the customer success program on our behalf? And so when I talk about the COE, that delivery piece and having it move out, that's exactly an example of that. So we're actually building out the framework, the journey maps, the playbooks, how we monitor customers' progression, and then allowing the partners to be the delivery for a lot of that, right? And so for us, that's kind of the most critical part, is being able to know that as the company, the digital transformation and the as a service transformation happens, this framework is applicable across the board.
Mm-hmm. Carlos, remind me that I need to have you back to talk about partner success, because that's so important and
Yeah,
another thing that's just not talked about enough. So we'll do that.
it's something that's still being figured out, and I think that we've been learning a lot, and I think we have a pretty good model, and we're looking at scaling it here in the next 6 months.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, I mean, even us being an early stage in terms of our COE, there's a lot of interest in the partner extending our customer success practice and methodology to our partners. And at the end of the day, you want to ensure that they are driving that consistent experience because they are essentially representing your company and the delivery that your company is known for. Pure takes a lot of pride in our NPS score, and what better way to ensure that you're keeping that NPS score high and consistent by ensuring that your partners and everyone that engages with your customers is driving the same best practice consistent experience. So that's another value of the COE, is making sure that there is that consistency across all delivery, no matter who it is that's representing your delivery organization.
That's so true. That's a really great point too, Rigo, right? That's absolutely true. COEs, that's really the point, right? It shouldn't matter who's then going to deliver. If it's you, if it's a partner, if it's a team that rolls up under you, the CS leader, or if it's a team that sits alongside you. I love that. That's a great point. Okay, so I want to make sure we leave a few minutes for audience questions. And I know we've been asking some throughout the session, but everyone listening, if you have additional questions for Carlos and Rigo, please go ahead and pop them in the Q&A or just write in the chat so we can be sure to get to them. Before we get to that, 2 more questions for you, gentlemen. So a little more rapid fire, maybe. Carlos, this one's for you. I want to know, what are some of the benefits that you have seen since implementing a COE? And are there additional things that you're still looking to see and looking to iterate upon and improve within your COE?
So I think the benefits obviously are really establishing kind of your role in the company. It's being that evangelist for this role. I mean, you go work at any company it's by default, you're gonna have a sales and marketing organization, right? Helping the company understand that the customer success function is equally critical, right? Is some of the work that I feel has come out of this, right? Being able to sit at our yearly event and the CEO on stage during the keynote, and the word customer success flashes up like 10 feet wide, right behind him as he's speaking, is the output of this customer success. I mean, we've put customer success on the map on the company at Aruba. And I would say one of the things that's also accomplished is it's helped elevate the entire team, right? We've been doing this for 3 years. Everybody on my team has since gotten an expanded role. I think we're doing, in my opinion, and I say this obviously super biased, I actually feel that Aruba is changing the game in the industry of the digital first approach, with the way that we're able to scale customer success with our digital engagement, leveraging telemetry, leveraging machine learning analytics. I mean, we actually started backwards, right? We actually built up a data ops team before we started hiring CSMs. And because of the work that we've done, we're now being asked to participate with the human element in it. And so I'm actually starting in the other side, where people are starting to, post-COVID, trying to find how to drive efficiencies with less budget and look at digital engagement. I'm now monetizing customer success and being asked to put human element in front of it on top of the digital. So I would say that that's the outcome of a lot of the work that the team, because this isn't me, right? This is a team of people that have accomplished this. And I say, the things for me here, the things that we're still working on, I mentioned the partner program, I think, is the next, I would say, our contribution to industry. I think that there's a number of people watching about how this rolls out and are interested in how this plays out. And so I personally feel very fortunate to be in a situation where, we can maybe talk about this in a year and say, well, here's how it's done. Here's how we recommend you do it. And I think it hasn't been easy. We've been learning a lot about it, but I do think we're landing on a model that's going to be scalable. And the second part for me is the globalization of the team, right? We're a very global company. When we first started, it was very North America focused, but for the next year, we're actually going to be, mirroring the footprint that we have in North America across the globe.
Love it. Rigo, is there anything, I assume you are looking to accomplish many of those things that Carlos just mentioned, but is there anything else that sort of as one of your ultimate end game goals with implementing a COE that Carlos didn't say, that you're like, I hope my COE gets me to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope I have some very strong opinions about the customer experience. Obviously, I don't have all the answers, but I've been doing this a long time, and I believe very firmly in what a great customer experience should look like, what that should represent. And that is my aspiration, is for people to say Pure has a fantastic customer experience. They've crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. They are preemptive, they're proactive, they're prescriptive, and really this great partnership of subject matter experts that are looking out for our best interests, our being our partners and our customers. So that is my aspiration, that the Center of Excellence and the team members within the Center of Excellence could drive that experience and ultimately garner and gain some of that recognition for really making a difference in terms of how we help our customers drive value or receive value from the products and services, as well as optimize the products and services that they've purchased. I think that for me is key. One of the questions that just came up too, in terms of, Carlos, I don't know if you saw the question here, is how have you incorporated or plan to incorporate Lean or Sigma 6 processes? So as Carlos was actually talking about, thinking about some of the other organizational pieces that I've had in the back of my mind, one of which is Lean and Sigma 6 processes certification. I've actually extended training and certification to my team, even if it's not a core capability of a CSM or function. I think just having that skill set, that perspective, is extremely invaluable. So the more people you can bring in to your organization, any organization, I don't care which organization it is, where they have that disciplined, process-focused approach, I think that just makes for a better organizational structure, delivery, processes, strategy overall. So I'm a big believer in Lean and Six Sigma, and I'm more than happy and willing to extend training certification to people on my team because of the value that brings.
Yeah, and Carlos, I know you guys use an agile approach, but I don't know if you're using Lean or Six Sigma. Are you?
Yeah, so it actually just hit me that I didn't do a good job of calling that out. So when we sent out the slide that I was shared in that CX enablement group, right, we actually have a layer of program management. So we kind of call it the PMO. And those are the program managers who actually help drive a lot of the conversations and a lot of documentation of the process. So within that, there is some Six Sigma capabilities. But to your point, Marley, the way that we do program development is a very agile approach. We develop what we would call the MVP, because one of the first things we learned is there's so much to do that you get so focused in trying to boil the ocean that you never get started. And so adopting that MVP methodology helped us really start making progress. I mean, I think right now across the team, we're driving about, I think last I checked, 11 different MVPs, right? So different programs happening at the same time. And then the one thing I'll also add is, especially in our advanced service programs, we're doing some of the, I would say, managed services capabilities. We also are introducing ITIL as well, right? So understanding the whole ITIL piece is super critical. And that's where, from a program management perspective, we don't have to be subject matter experts, but we have folks that are ITIL experts that during that workshop, make sure that the ITIL capabilities are being built as part of that journey map.
Yes. Carlos, I think you might be reading my mind because you're talking about all my future webinar ideas right now. So I don't know what's happening. We're on the same wavelength. I love it. Okay, so last 2 minutes, you guys, rapid fire, really, really quick. This last question might be the most important. Rigo, I will go to you first. If there are CS leaders out there right now listening to us, looking to start building a center of excellence, where should they start?
BI and analytics and CS operations absolutely need to start there to build a framework, as well as clearly convey and articulate and understand what the charter is and how to educate and help others understand it. So get your charter down, get your BI and analytics team in place, and make sure that you have CS ops to pull it all together.
Carlos, last word. What did Rigo either forget, or what would you add?
Actually, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think the order or the sequence of those may vary based on your current situation, but in our case, we were ready to develop that charter because we had to hire the CS ops as our first role, and we had the data to really understand what we needed to go do, right? One can come before the other, but definitely, like in my case, having CS ops early on allowed me to defend a lot of the strategy that we were putting together. So to me, it's get your arms around the data, and you don't have to have it all, but find that one problem statement that you can really stand behind and then drive that.
Amazing. Carlos and Rigo, thank you both again so very much for your time today. Thank you all for joining us. Reminder that everyone will receive the recording of this session within the next day or so, along with the slide that Carlos was showing behind him. We'll make sure we make it bigger next time. And I hope everyone out there will join us again next month when Megan Macaluso will join me to discuss how to execute a design workshop for digital customer success. So hope to see you all then. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.